Hello wonderful human beings, my name is Sheldon Evans, and in this week's video I'm going to be showing you how to make your landscape photos pop in Lightroom. So I'm going to start off this video by saying that I am in no way a professional landscape photographer, nor do I claim to be one. But like a lot of you guys, I do have a camera and I like to travel, and occasionally I like to take some scapes of lands when I'm traveling. And it's fun to play around with different types of photography and see what you can do and what you like. And you don't have to be a professional at everything you do. You can have some fun as well. So before we get into Lightroom and edit our photos, there's a few things you can do in camera to increase your chances of getting a good photo. One is getting your exposure correct in camera. You want enough detail in the shadows and the highlights so that you can push and pull and play around with the sliders in Lightroom once you're editing your image. If you blow out your highlights or clip your shadows, you're not going to have that detail to edit in Lightroom anyway. So you've already technically lost that detail. So you want to be shooting in RAW and not in JPEG so that you have that extra room and that extra information to play around with in post. And second is making sure that you have the right gear. So landscape photography is usually shot with a wide lens and you can use whatever you like. So these days when you buy a camera kit, a lot of the time it does come with a kit lens. And that may be something like an 18 to 55mm, which is actually quite wide and wide enough for landscape photography. It might not be the sharpest or the best lens, but you can get some great images out of it. I've shot with a range of wide angle lenses, but the one that I love the most is this one, the Tamron 2470 f2.8. And the reason I like this lens is that it's tack sharp all the way through the range. It has image stabilization and it can take a beating, and I've used it in pretty much any situation you can imagine. And there are a whole range of other items that you can use to get a good image, whether it's using a sturdy tripod, ND filters, polarizers, UV filters. But let's assume that you've just got a wide angle lens and a camera and you're going handheld and you're going to explore and take some photos. And you're not a professional landscape photographer, but you've taken some images and you want to edit those. That's what we're going to be doing today. So let's jump into the computer and I'll give you a rundown of how I edit my landscapes. Okay guys, so we're in Lightroom now and I've imported some photos. The one we're going to be editing today is this one of the ocean and some rocks that I shot handheld with my Canon 6D and a 16 to 35mm lens. So it is quite wide. Now the first thing I always like to do is make sure that my horizon is level. There's nothing worse than having a skew horizon. It makes the entire image feel off balance. So to do that, you're going to click this crop icon and go ahead and click auto. Now what this auto will do is align your image according to the horizon. It uses the metadata in your image and it'll look for lines in the image that might be an horizon. Once you've done that, go ahead and click done. Now as you can see in this image, I've got a lot of detail in the shadows and in the sky. So that's great. And that gives us a lot of room to play around with and work with. So the first thing I'm going to do is bump up the exposure slightly. I like to underexpose my photos just a little bit so that I have more detail. Then I'm going to bump up the contrast a little bit. Bring the highlights down. Now this is one of my favorite things to do, is bring the highlights down so that you'll see the sky darkens and it gives you a lot more detail and a bit of a moody look to it. We can boost the shadows slightly, bring the black level down a little bit, and then clarity. This is the slider that everyone goes crazy with and loves because it just makes your photo look amazing. It doesn't work so well with portraits and people because of what it does. It creates this crazy sharpening effect that looks great, a bit like an HDR image. So you'll see if I bump it all the way to the top, it makes it look like this was some storm crazy professional landscape photo. But we don't want to be cranking it up so high because it can get a bit crazy. So I'm going to keep it around 38 or 40 for this image, and I think that looks good. So then I'm going to leave vibrance and saturation alone for this image. I don't think that it needs to be more saturated than it is. So once you've got your base adjustments done, you can start playing around with the creative aspects of your image, like coloring and adjustment brushes, which I'm going to show you how to do now. So one thing that I like to do is mess with the colors in the image. Now there will be purists and other photographers out there who will say, no, you can't use this, you can't change the way the image looks so much, it doesn't look real, it doesn't look realistic. And to that I have to say, I don't care. I like it. It's what I like doing. We have this program, use it to your advantage, play around with it. Who cares if they don't like it? If you like it, do it. So a cool way to change the color of the sky right in Lightroom is to use a graduated filter. So you're going to click on this little button here and then drag from the top of your image downwards. And this will create a graduated filter. So all the adjustments you make on the right hand side here will only apply to that region. So you can go ahead and change the temperature to change the color of the sky. Let's make it maybe a little bit more blue, add some pink into it and make it a bit purple. I think that looks kind of cool. It might not be real, but it looks cool. Maybe you want to drop the exposure slightly, bump up the contrast a bit, and you can add some more selective clarity. And this works well with skies. You can make it look intense and crazy and stormy and just over the top. So drag that slider up a little bit and make that pop a bit. then you can go ahead and click close, and that will save the sky. So now you can already see that this image is starting to look a lot more intense than it did when it first started out. And to check out what you've done, you can click this little icon here to get a side-by-side comparison between your original and your edited version. Another way is to click the backslash button on your keyboard, and you can flip between your before and after. So now once we've done this, I'm going to go ahead and make a few more adjustments to make this image look a bit more 3D. To do that, I like to add another graduated filter to the bottom, and let's drop that exposure slightly. And now we're going to use an adjustment brush. What an adjustment brush does is similar to the graduated filter, so where it'll apply an adjustment to a certain part of the image. So you can go ahead and click on the adjustment brush over here, and then at the bottom you can adjust the size and how much you want it to feather. So I'm going to bring it down slightly, and you can start painting on your image. Nothing will happen unless you have changed some of these settings. So I'm going to bump up the exposure, and you'll see that it only changes where I've painted. So I like to bump the exposure up slightly and then paint around objects and create a bit of a 3D look to my image. Now you can go ahead and play around with this however you like and paint your image and add some 3D dodging and burning to it, to your tasting and to your liking. It's up to you. And that's why I say this is creative aspect. It's up to you to play around and have some fun. Next, we're going to take a look at the HSL sliders. Now, HSL stands for hue, saturation, and luminance. And they're exactly what they say. Hue changes the hue of the image, saturation, the saturation, and luminance, basically the brightness of each individual color. So you can go ahead and click all, and it'll give you access to each of them for each of the colors. So you'll see that if I slide the red slider, it changes the red in the sky. Or if I slide the blue slider, it'll change the blue in the sky. So let's add a little bit more blue. Maybe we want to brighten it up a little bit with the luminance slider. And another thing you can do is to target colors specifically. So you'll see these little icons right next to hue, saturation, and luminance. If you click on that icon and then click on a certain part of the image and drag up and down, it'll adjust all the sliders that pertain to that color range. So you'll see if I click on the sky and drag up and down, it's going to change those specific colors, and you'll see the slider moving on the right hand side. And just like with anything, you can go crazy with this and create insane colors and make it look like a fantasy scene, and that's up to you. If you like that, go for it. But I kind of like the way it's looking at the moment, so we're going to move on and take a look at sharpening. Now with sharpening, you can also go overboard very easily, but you'll see that there are some default values applied. Now the reason that these default values are applied is that Adobe knows that when a raw photo is taken, it applies a certain amount of sharpening to bring it sort of to a base level that a JPEG would be. So you can play around with this and increase it to your liking, but I don't like to go overboard with this. I just add a little bit of sharpening just to give it a bit of a punch. And finally, lens corrections. So what the lens correction in Lightroom does is apply a digital correction to your image to correct for the exact lens and camera combination that you have. Your camera stores this information in the file so that when you open it up in Lightroom, it knows exactly which camera and lens was used. So when you click on Enable Profile Corrections, you'll see that the image sort of widens out and it makes the edges a lot brighter because it's removing that vignetting. And you'll see that it's applied for a Canon with a 16 to 35mm lens, and that's exactly what this image was shot with, and it knows what calculations and corrections to make. And the final thing I like to do is to crop my image to a 16:9 aspect ratio. This is my favorite aspect ratio for landscapes because I like that wide look, that widescreen look. So click on your crop icon at the top, change your aspect ratio to 16:9, and then crop it however you like. I like to keep my horizon on a third line. I think that looks quite cool, and click done. And there you go, there's your image. And again, you can use that backslash icon to see the before and after, and you can see what these adjustments have made. Now again, like I said, I'm not a professional landscape photographer, and this isn't a professional landscape image. It's just something that I took while I was traveling a bit. Obviously the sky wasn't actually purple, and the scene didn't look like that at all, but I like the way it looks. So play around with Lightroom, change colors, change contrast, brighten, darken, but just don't go too overboard that it looks ridiculous and gross. But play around with it, and if you like it, you like it. And you'll learn from your mistakes. You'll see how your style develops as you edit more and more. So if you do take your photos, post them to Instagram, tag me, let me see, I'll comment on them, I'll check them out, I'll check out your accounts. But with that being said, thank you guys so much for watching this video, I really do appreciate it. It's because you keep coming back to watch that I keep creating these. So if you did like the video, don't forget to hit that like button, smash it, punch it up, pop it, kill it, do whatever you like to it. Hit that subscribe button if you want to see more stuff like this. I upload videos every single week. And as always, I shall see you in the next video. Cheers.